Hi, I'm Anna. I am the owner of Anja UK Photography. I specialize in maternity, newborn, and family photography. And this is Frames of Life, podcast where we explore how to live life with more clarity and purpose. If you still haven't done it, please hit subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really keeps me motivated. My today's makeup was done by Rasita Stan. The podcast room is provided by Nationwide Renewables. Thank you so much for your support, guys. As a maternity photographer, I work with pregnant women every day, capturing some of life's most beautiful moments. But behind some of these glowing portraits, there are stories. I've come to know stories of heartbreak, of years of trying, of dreams that felt impossible. Today I'm talking with Gemma, a fertility counselor who understands that the journey to motherhood isn't always the joyful path we imagine. For the women who've sat in my studio after years of struggle, who finally made it to this moment, this conversation is for you. And for those who are still fighting the fight, still hoping against hope, this is also for you. Gemma has walked this path both personally and professionally. She is there for the 3 a.m. moments when hope feels impossible, when you question everything about yourself and about your future. Her work reminds us that some of the greatest struggles become the foundation for our most meaningful breakthroughs. This isn't just about fertility. It's about finding yourself when life doesn't go according to plan and discovering that your worth was never tied to an outcome. Hello, Gemma.
Hello, Anna.
How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and taking the invitation. When I came across your profile, I thought this would be something what my clients, my audience really need. So can you please tell us what do you do and tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am a fertility counsellor based in Ripon in North Yorkshire. I've been a counsellor for many years, for 13 years, and it's in the last year that I decided to specialise in fertility counselling.
I think it would be great if we jump straight into the subject, why we are here. What challenges do women face during fertility treatment that people may not realise?
I think the biggest challenge is the emotional roller coaster that you go through. You know, for many of us, we grow up listening to stories about growing up, meeting the man of our dreams, settling down and having children and starting a family. And for many of us, we just think that that's how it's going to be. And then I guess we grow older and we start to hear about the fact that it might not always be as straightforward a story as we hope it might be, but we always think that's not going to happen to us. And then imagine you're going through your story and you meet the perfect man, you're in a solid relationship, financially you're stable, you're ready to take that next step, and then suddenly nothing happens, or it does happen and you start to experience losses. And this happens in a context of your friends, your peers, their story going the way you wanted it to go. And all of a sudden you feel like you're being left behind, or you're in this no man's land where it's not happening. Your story has stalled, and it can be incredibly difficult to navigate the complex emotions that come up around that, like anger, feeling jealous, feeling shame for feeling jealous, and then that kind of feeling of failure that you've done something wrong along the way. Why is this happening to me? And it can be very difficult to manage that, because often the people that you might normally go to are the people that are getting pregnant. Your best friend suddenly becomes somebody that just isn't going to understand what you're going through.
I totally agree, because there is obviously, I am a maternity photographer, so I do talk with my clients, but also with my friends and people around me. There is a lot of people who are trying for the baby, and it feels almost like when this doesn't happen straight away, it's becoming like a very sensitive subject. And I think, like, I really genuinely didn't know there is a counselor who is specializing like yourself. I think it's so amazing to have someone like this, because then it may solve a lot of problems people are going going through.
Yeah, and actually it's much more common than we realise. 1 in 6 couples will experience infertility, and by that, that's having unprotected sex for a year and not conceiving. You know, we kind of think this isn't something that happens to many people. Actually, it's you think 1 in 6, there will be somebody that you know within your close network that's going through this, even if you don't know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I even had a chat recently with one of my friends who is trying, and I was a bit skeptical. I didn't know if I should ask, but I already knew your profile, and I know like it can be really stressful for people. So I openly asked, and we had a great chat, and she was actually really happy that I kind of like normalized it for her. So that's great, to know that service like this exists and it can help so many people. What's the biggest misconception about infertility?
Well, firstly, that it's not a common thing. It's much more common than we realise. But also there's a real narrative around stress and infertility. You know, people, when you're struggling to conceive, will often tell you, oh, just relax and it will happen. Or, everybody knows a friend of a friend of a friend that couldn't conceive, and then they went on holiday and they relaxed and it just happened. The reality is, though, of course we know stress isn't good for our body. We know that. But the reality is that many problems around infertility are a medical issue. Well, no amount of de-stressing is going to stop the fact that you might have polycystic ovaries or you might have endometriosis. So I think that there's a common misunderstanding that exists in just the general population, and including myself. When I went through it, I didn't realise how complex this whole issue was, and obviously being on the journey, I learned all about it. So I understand why this narrative exists, but sometimes it can make women feel like they're doing something wrong, that they're the cause of not being able to get pregnant because they're too stressed. Well, actually, it's a very painful experience, so it is going to be very stressful if you can't conceive. So you end up in this terrible kind of catch-22 cycle.
And then is Gemma, who can help to solve this kind of problems, maybe not solve, but manage it a bit better. How do you help women in the journey?
I think the main thing is about validating people's experiences. So you can almost feel like you don't know who you are anymore. Feelings like anger and jealousy, that might not be something that you really identify yourself as being, and you can start to lose sight of who you've become. You also feel like you have to put this mask up to the world. One of our most basic needs is to be authentic. Well, it can put you in real conflict when you're put in social situations where there's somebody that's pregnant, you feel intensely jealous, you feel that you've got to mask it, that you've got to look like everything's okay. And that can be very difficult to manage. So the way that I help is just to give people space to be very honest about how they're feeling. And often, because I have been through the experience, I might suggest that they might be feeling a certain way. And obviously that's an invitation to say, yeah, I do feel insanely jealous, but I feel like a really bad person. And then my response is, there is nothing bad about that. You are a normal person reacting to a very difficult situation. So it's just about validating and helping people to realise that very, very normal to feel the feels, basically.
I'm just thinking now how it actually must be difficult for people who are going through this. I was very lucky with my partner. We didn't try for long, but I know I would be in really bad mental state if it didn't happen the way it happened. Do you think if you did not go through this journey yourself, do you think, I always ask this question, guests in general, do you think you would be able to help other people?
I think with my normal counsellor hat on and thinking about all the clients that I've seen over the years, I do strongly believe you can empathise and support without physically having been through the same experience yourself. But I think what is unique, I think the world has changed, especially in the world of therapy, that often people because we can do therapy online now, they will seek out the expert in whatever field. And people often, because I think it's such a painful experience, we live in a world where you can pretty much get whatever you want at any moment. You know, you work hard, you earn enough money, you can get it. And I think that people, it's important that there's a pain behind this around, I did everything right. I did everything that I was supposed to do, and this isn't happening. And no amount of money, well, money does help actually, but no amount of money or me working hard is going to somehow magically make this baby appear. So I think that I do understand the pain, and I think that people hearing that I understand the pain, that really helps them to kind of come to me. The mask goes down, they don't have to be any different, and they are with somebody that knows what that pain might be. Obviously my experience is my experience, but I have a very good understanding.
Yeah, thank you for reassuring.
We did agree, and you feel comfortable with sharing your own story. Can we talk about this now?
Yeah, sure. So just like I've been saying, I felt like I did everything right. I remember, as many of us are told about, don't get pregnant as a teenager. You know, you learn about sex, you know, you've got to have protected sex. You know, we all live in this fear of getting pregnant when it's not the right time. And I felt like I found a loving, supportive partner. We settled down, we became financially in a stable position, and we started trying. And I don't know. I don't know that I ever thought it was going to be this really straightforward experience. I always knew that it can take a little bit longer, but a year passed of us trying and nothing happened. And then another year went past. And if you think about this, I'm talking in years, but actually what happens is month after month, you wait for your period to hopefully not arrive, and then it arrives. So a month after month, you go through this cycle of disappointment. And then when I finally did get pregnant, I then had a miscarriage. And then I very quickly fell pregnant again, and then I had another miscarriage. So I've gone through this huge kind of period of waiting to be in this position where I felt like this is finally happening. And then each time it felt like it was just ripped away from beneath my feet. And what happened within this is I went to the GP and I said, I really feel like there's something wrong. So I didn't feel like there was something wrong at the start, but I started to think, okay, I've always had long cycles. I've always had very painful periods that were always dismissed in the medical world. Just go onto the contraceptive pill. And then after having these 2 miscarriages, I really felt like something was wrong. So I went to the doctor and I said, can I have some investigations, please? And the protocol is you have to have 3 miscarriages before anything will be investigated. Wow. And both times, you know, again, this is a world that you find yourself in where I didn't know much about what happened with a miscarriage. I thought it was all quick and over really quickly. What happened with me both times was there was retained pregnancy products. So, you know, things didn't come away naturally, so I had to have procedures to get rid of that. So it was not only an emotionally draining experience, it was also quite physically demanding. So I was trying to say to this GP, I don't want to get pregnant for a 3rd time to then have to miscarry for a 3rd time. And then what happened, my period actually didn't come back. So then I was left in this no man's land. And the more I went back to say, I really think there's something wrong. I've had these miscarriages, now my period hasn't arrived. I was not being listened to. I would break down. I would then be told that, see, you're really stressed and emotional about this, and that's the reason why this is happening. Which is why I feel quite passionate about talking about, your distress isn't responsible. So in the end, it was my mum that suggested to go and see a private gynecologist. Now, I think there's quite a good girl mentality in the medical world. You know, we're all trained to be good. Doctors are, you know, they're very educated people, but I think that we are almost kind of conditioned that we have to take what they say. So I was a bit like, oh, can I even go and see a private gynecologist? And my mom's like, yeah, of course. So I went and saw a private gynecologist, and basically within 2 weeks, she diagnosed me with polycystic ovaries that had been undetected for all of these years. I went for other tests. It then culminated in me needing hysteroscopy and a laparoscopy to have a look, and it turned out that my womb was divided in 2. I had endometriosis, I had scarring on a fallopian tube to the point that one was blocked. So I'd gone from this journey of being told, nothing's wrong with you, you're stressed, that's the problem, to actually, there was a problem and she sorted it out. And then it was from that point that she said, look, we've taken the division away in your womb, we've got rid of the endometriosis, but IVF will be your best way forward. And so that's the path that we found ourselves on.
It's very sad that you really need to go through 3 miscarriages to be looked at. Gemma, what would be practical advice you would give to anyone who is starting this journey now?
So I think you need to think about boundaries. What are you comfortable with telling people, for example? Who are you comfortable being around? And I think that when you're thinking about answers to these questions, you almost need to put the people pleasing to one side or other people's needs to one side. You need to think about what are your needs. So, for example, there may be long-standing friends that are in the throes of early motherhood, and actually it's just too triggering for you to be around them. So my advice to people is not to feel like you're being mean, not to feel like you are pushing that friend to one side, but actually kind of saying, for me, that's just not a helpful person to be around, and thinking who you can be around and not feeling guilty for that, if that makes sense. Which then leads on to the next thing around compassion. When you are navigating such an emotional journey, and as I've said, you know, all of these kind of conflicting emotions come up, you've got to be compassionate to yourself, because this is a very difficult journey. And I always ask people, what would you be saying to a best friend that was telling you this, that how they were navigating this such a painful and difficult journey? You would be saying, don't feel bad about maybe declining a friend's baby shower invitation. If that's going to make you feel terrible, that's not somewhere where you need to be. So it's almost kind of thinking in reverse, what advice would you be giving to a good friend? Because often that's the advice that you need to give to yourself, although typically we're all very good at giving advice to other people, but not to ourselves.
Yes, this is like really difficult subject, I need to say. But I think definitely helps when you say that we shouldn't be people pleasing, especially in such a difficult journey. But it still must be very difficult, don't you think?
Well, it
because
is.
We've got like friends, a family, and we most of the time probably feel like, yes, we need to, because they are the closest people to us. But then you go there, and I can just, you know, like imagine if I was going through this. It must be very hard. It must be really, really hard. What does success look like in your work?
I think success is about, I guess, as I've just talked about, just being confident to put some boundaries in place and being able to listen to what's going on. Because often in life, many of us find difficulty in managing emotions, and that stems in childhood. Did you have adults around you that helped you understand emotions, what they mean? That, you know, things like anger, well, actually in its purest form, anger is a really helpful emotion. It allows us to put boundaries in place. It allows us to protect ourselves. But if we had messages that anger is a bad thing, we might go through life feeling like every time we feel angry that we have to push it away and we have to push it down. But of course, what we know about emotions is that the more we push something down, the more it will just present itself in different ways. So success for me with the clients that I work with is about acknowledging what's going on for them. It's not about allowing people to be angry at everybody and unleash all these emotions, but actually to say, right, what's going on for me right now? Okay, I'm feeling a bit angry. Why am I feeling angry? Well, it may well be that some well-meaning friend has said something like, oh, well, you know, why are you thinking about fertility treatment? Why don't you just adopt? There's loads of children out there that need good homes. Now, that's a well-meaning comment, isn't it?
Yeah.
But actually, in the moment, if you're on the receiving end of that, just as I was many years ago, it can make you feel absolutely furious. So what success would be like is saying afterwards, do you know what, I felt really, really angry. And actually, maybe that's somebody that for the meantime, I just need to put some boundaries around. It might mean that it doesn't mean that I might not see them, but it just means that perhaps I don't share too much of what's going on for me. And when they ask me questions, I divert the conversation or I ask them questions about them. So it's tuning into these emotions can really help you to navigate them and manage them, because, you know, you'll be triggered in many different ways and you need to be attuned to what's going on to know how to manage it.
Yes, that's really amazing that you're explaining everything in details. When is the best moment to seek for the support?
I think, as is the case with everybody, I would say don't wait until you're in crisis to go to counselling. Actually, counselling is great even when you're not in crisis. And, you know, sometimes people feel that they have to have permission, you know, perhaps when I think back to that year, well, it was nearly 2 years when we couldn't conceive, I might have felt like, oh, I can't really go for fertility counselling because I know there's people out there that have been trying much longer than me, are in a much worse situation. But actually, that's distorted thinking. It's never too bad to come and seek counselling. If you're finding that your well-being isn't being impacted, you're feeling like you're maybe just dulled down, you're not as happy as you want to be or feeling as fulfilled, just come to counselling and just talk, because often it's when we're in crisis, you know, we've been taught that we have to have like this broken leg before we'll go. No, you don't need to. Like there's no threshold on this kind of stuff. Like just go and start talking.
How can partners, family, friends support someone who is going through this journey? And my question here also would be, who should I actually share this information with?
Okay, so I would say the best thing to do when anybody is going through any difficult time, fertility or non-fertility, is just to listen. I think we can often feel that we've got to fix it in some way, that we have to offer a problem or a solution. But my experience of being a counsellor is people come to me because I am going to listen and I'm going to show that I understand. I'm going to validate what's going on for them. And I might say, that sounds really, really difficult. I can only imagine if that happened to me. And that is so valuable. But often in life, and I'm guilty of doing it to my friends as well, it's horrible, isn't it, to see somebody that you love in pain and you can want to try and take that pain away. But often, in the case of infertility, no amount of love and anything is going to make that baby come in to your belly. What will help is just somebody being alongside and saying, that sounds really, really difficult. Like, what's that like for you? And to give that person the opportunity to tell you and for you to be able to listen.
What, Gemma, drives your passion for this work?
So I remember only too well how isolating an experience infertility can be. I remember lying awake at 3 a.m, wondering why my body was failing me, why I couldn't be happy for my friends that were pregnant, wondering what else could I be doing to make this happen more quickly for myself, and feeling absolutely alone, and being on Google and just, you know, we've all been there when we're just desperately searching for answers and feeling like no one understands. And I think that the fertility clinics and the doctors, they're very focused on the problem and fixing the problem and getting you pregnant. But there's such a huge gap in the market around the emotional well-being of that person that's going through the experience. And I feel so passionately that nobody should be alone like this. Nobody should feel isolated and vulnerable and not knowing who to turn to. So that's where my passion lies, because I felt like that. And I know that many women still do feel like that. So that's why I want to talk about this as much as I can, to normalise and show that there's you don't have to be alone. There are people out there that will understand what you're going through.
I believe in such a service you only offer one-to-one counseling. Would group counseling work in this kind of scenario, or?
Potentially. So I have offered free workshops to help women navigating the emotions of infertility. Predominantly, people want one-to-one. I think it's a double-edged sword, the group stuff. There are many people that gain comfort from going to groups and being amongst people that understand. So I volunteer for Fertility Network UK, and I run a support group for women that are going through infertility treatment and have experienced a miscarriage within that. I guess there's huge comfort in that, but then it can feel like, you know, when you go into a doctor's waiting room and you watch one by one each person being called through to go through out of the waiting room, and that's how it can feel. You know, you find yourself in this waiting room and you've all got the same problem, and then one by one each person leaves, and suddenly that one person that was sat next to you that you had that kind of kindred spirit with, they're now pregnant and you're not. So that can be really difficult. So I think it's a very individual, personal preference. Some people like being part of groups, some people don't, or they find a bit of both. Like, group is helpful for one part of the journey, whereas they might need some more one-to-one work. I think also often you know, somebody may come to me because of wanting to look at the fertility issues they're dealing with, but often it can link to deeper stuff, like perhaps you've had trauma in your life, or perhaps you have had experiences where you feel like you're not good enough, and then this is something that triggers that, you know, obviously it's a medical problem, but it can feel like this is triggering an old wound where you're not good enough, where you feel shameful, but where you feel like you've done something to bring this upon yourself. And that kind of needs unpacking, and that's not something that you would do in a group. That's something that you would do with an individual, because we are all very complex. We all come to any situation with a whole personal history. We come with our whole bag of stuff, as I like to put it.
Gemma, would you go a bit deeper with your clients, so you wouldn't particularly only focus on fertility? If something needs unpacking, as you are saying, you would use your experience and profession to go as deep as needed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, the present moment obviously needs supporting. And if somebody came to me and they were talking about, I don't know, maybe they were in the depths of IVF and talking about how to manage the 2-week wait when they're waiting to see whether there's a positive pregnancy test. Well, me asking them questions about their childhood probably isn't going to be helpful. But we all come to present problems with a back history. So I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't try to help people understand, well, I don't know, perhaps you're a high achieving person that has always worked really hard. You've always been academically gifted. You know, you've always, I don't know, seemingly gone through life and achieved what you wanted to achieve. And maybe this is the one thing that you can't achieve. And perhaps there's some unpacking to do around failure around that. Perhaps, you know, you look back to your childhood and you gained positive reinforcement for always being the high achiever. So that would put you in a huge conflict, wouldn't it? If you've been this high achieving person that's always done it, and then all of a sudden you're failing, and you're failing your parents because you're not making them grandparents. You know, so the pain, it's not just the pain of being able to get pregnant, it's also the pain of feeling like you're not only failing yourself, you're failing all these people around you.
Gemma, there is one question which came to my mind when we were talking about miscarriages. Do people seek medical help after, I don't want this to sound bad, but after having some miscarriages? Or would you advise them to go and check even without having such situations?
I think the answer to that is that people find themselves on this path and entering it from various different angles. So it may well be that you have recurrent miscarriages, and that's what alerts you to the fact that there may be an issue that needs to be looked at. Some people just try for a long time and nothing happens. Some people even have a baby and then they can't conceive again, and that's called secondary infertility. So again, they will have gone through a prolonged period of time of having unprotected sex and nothing happening. So I guess there's multiple routes that people could be accessing or finding themselves on this path. But, you may have a history within your family of gynecological issues that, may get in the way, like polycystic ovaries, for instance. I know some clinics will offer like a fertility MOT, so they'll look at your ovarian reserve. I know now from my experience, there is a legacy within the maternal side of my family around certainly painful periods. My mum and my grandma were quite young when they started having children, so maybe they didn't present themselves in the same way, but there was definitely something within the family. So with my own children, I will be advising that they get some checks. So I think, again, it's a very personal thing. Some people might not think that there's an issue until you kind of see what happens, and then if something's not happening, that may trigger them to have some investigations.
Yeah, because I was just also thinking, like, what is the right time to wait before it actually becomes a problem?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes you can just leave it even without having any major problems, like, for example, miscarriages.
Yeah.
But you can wait a bit too long and it can get on the top of, like, having busy work life and everything else was going on in our life. And yeah, that was probably, what I also wanted to confirm.
Well, you know what, also, I think as women, we're sold this line that we can have everything, that we can have highly successful jobs and we can have families. And yes, that's great if we can. But in society, there's been a shift, hasn't there, where many women, myself included, wait until longer to even start thinking about having a family, when in the eyes of the medical world, you're already going to be an older mother. Your egg reserve isn't as great. From age 35 onwards, our fertility declines. And again, I was naive. I don't think I really understood all of that until I found myself in the position. And then I started to have a look and I was like, oh, okay, so I have left it quite late here. And, and I think that adds another huge pressure around time, that people suddenly feel like, they're in their early 30s, mid 30s before they're realizing that there's a problem. And then already they feel like time is running out, and that can put such an intense pressure on the whole situation.
Gemma, do you only work with fertility clients, or do you see also people for any other reasons?
So no, I see people for all kinds of reasons. I mean, many of the things that we've talked about, thinking your life is going to go a certain way, hitting periods of, problems, of adversity, dealing with emotions, needing help to deal with emotions, that can happen in the world of fertility and outside of the world of fertility. So with any client, I sit alongside and I understand their world, and I love working with fertility clients, but I also love working with the non-fertility clients. I love the diversity that my job brings. And I think that, I do a really good job in being alongside and understanding and validating. And as I said before, that is the key thing that many people don't get in normal life. And that's what I provide to people.
How people can find you?
So people can find me via my website, which is www.gemmaantcliffe-counselling.co.uk. I am also on Instagram as Fertility Counsellor Gemma. I'm also on Facebook. So yeah, there's many ways that people can contact me, and I'm sure that you'll provide my details within the caption.
Gemma, thank you so much for coming and sharing your lovely experience with us. I'm sure there is a lot of people who will find this so helpful.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.